Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates, First Data Resources, and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the UNO Television Studios, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome once again to Consider This. Consider the state of labor. Certainly we need laborers in the state of Nebraska, but are those laborers being paid what they're worth, enough to live on? You could debate this forever, but we have one man's point of view. He is the head of the Labor Institute here at UNO under the College of Public Affairs and Community Services. Just shifted to that.
Excellent.
CPACs, by the way. His name, by the way, is John Kretschmar. I want to thank you for joining us. John, you've been at this Labor Institute almost since its creation, correct, here at UNO?
Since its creation, 20 years. I brought the idea with me from Detroit. I'm initially from Michigan, and there were 5 universities that had labor ed programs. In the state of Michigan, there was none in Nebraska when I came in. I became part of the university in 1977. And it took 3 years of working with the university and the legislature and representatives of organized labor to get the program started.
To say you walk a fine line when you have organized labor in the state of Nebraska, and you certainly have a lot of big corporations, many of whom, and I'm not asking you to comment on this, many of whom contribute to this fine university.
Yes.
I'm throwing that out as something here at the beginning, but you don't have to go far in the headlines to pick up the fact that labor is an issue. We had in the last month or so, by the time this airs, possible unionizing or the effort to unionize at Omaha's meatpacking plants. The whole issue of teacher pay just continues and how they're going to work that out. Living wage here in the city of Omaha, the living wage ordinance.
Right.
You can go down the line. Healthcare industry is grappling with whether nurses and other healthcare workers should unionize. Is it a surprise that this is percolating so much again after sort of a quietness, maybe?
The pendulum swings back and forth, and one of the seminal events I think that took place in the 1990s was the first contested election for the president of the American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrial Organizations, or AFL-CIO,
yes,
at a national
slightly
level.
Familiar with that.
Yeah. In 1995, there were 2 candidates contesting for the presidency, both of them using platforms that emphasized a renewal of organized labor when it comes to political action and organizing workers that are no longer organized or aren't presently organized to give them a voice in the workplace. And both people had the same platform. It ended up that John Sweeney won, and since his inauguration into the office of president at the national scale, national level, there's been a remarkable upswing in both organizing and political involvement, and a rebirth in many instances of central labor councils and state federations of labor. So,
okay, you're pointing to from the union point of view,
right,
that the percolation has started with this pretty contested election. At least there was a lot of discussion,
right,
of the pendulum. Is it due to go back? But the economy has created, I think, some other things that make at least people who never talked about unions, and Nebraska is one of those right-to-work states where it's not highly unionized,
no.
And there are a lot of people that would just, they say, I would rather die than join a union or vote for a union.
The attitude is changing. It's interesting that there was some research done that said that I think non-supervisory workers nationwide said that I think 78% of them would like to have a larger voice at work, and they would join an employee association. Less than half of them want a voice at work and want to join a union. Now, the difference between an employee association, as in the Nebraska State Education Association, or a union, the American Federation of Teachers, is minuscule at best. Unions have, I think, become synonymous, the word union, with something that is undesirable. but people do want a voice in the workplace. And we've seen over the last 25 years a separation in our economy. We have a market economy that has been growing, but it hasn't been growing for everyone. We have chief executive officers or CEOs of major corporations doing better and better and better, but the custodians who clean the office for that CEO is not benefiting from this expansion. In the last 25 years, the richest, wealthiest 20% of the population has done exceedingly well, and the top 1% of U.S. families has more than doubled their portion of wealth in the United States. So people are beginning to see that they're being left behind.
All right, let's talk about the meatpacking industry.
Okay.
Just as an example, when I was growing up and went to high school in South Omaha, a number of my fellow students' parents worked in the meatpacking plants. And granted, some of those little homes in South Omaha certainly weren't luxurious. You know, every kid didn't have their own bedroom. Most of the moms stayed home, but they were able to support the family. Now, the kid might have had to go out and get a job at 16 to help, you know, pay for his Catholic schooling, because it was a Catholic school.
Right.
But this is a far cry. You know, the Falstaff union workers and the meatpacking union workers that made up South Omaha, as I know it, and North Omaha, there were probably similar situations. That ability does not exist anymore. Now, maybe I'm pointing out one industry unfairly.
I don't think so. I think there's been a decrease in unionization, and as a result, there's been a decrease in take-home pay, and there's been a decrease in the number of one-earner nuclear families that can survive.
But that's sort of a reality of today. Take out the one-earner issue just for a moment.
Okay.
I remember reading in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago that they took a number of jobs and figured for inflation, what were the increases or decreases over the last, I think it was 20 years. And meatpacking was nearly at the bottom of the list in losing. Not just staying the same, but losing.
When you adjust for inflation and you go back to the heyday of Southo, where nationally 90 to 95% of the folks belong to unions, and you look at the situation today where it's maybe 40 to 45% nationwide, when you adjust for inflation, the wages are half of what they were.
Half?
Half of what they were during its heyday.
Well, when we hear, and we have a good economy going here, but we hear constantly we need to be competitive, and the meat industry has certainly pulled that out. And certainly in Omaha, it's shifted a lot. We don't have the stockyards. A lot of factors have changed, but they've reopened some of the packing plants. They've got folks working there. And then you have just down the road at Hormel and Fremont, I believe you have a unionized situation there.
Right.
What's the difference? Is pay a difference? If working conditions?
Pay, working conditions. Carol, just in the state of Nebraska, it's not only a right to work state, but it's an employment at will state. Employment at will is a legal doctrine that says you as an employee can quit at any time that you want. But on the other side, an employer can
let you go.
Let you go.
At will.
At will. You have a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute state of employment with that employer. And they can fire you for no reason. They can fire you for a bad reason. They can fire you for a capricious reason. And it's legal as long as they don't violate some of the federal statutes to protect workers because of their disability or their age or their national origin or their gender. So if you walked in one day with a Nike t-shirt on and I was your employer, I could say, listen, I didn't have to give you any advance warning, but this is an Adidas workplace because the Nebraska Cornhuskers all wear Adidas and Nike is not appreciated here. I can let you go, and I will let you go. Legally, you have no recourse to come back against me because I fired you for what seemed to be an arbitrary and capricious reason. You wore the wrong t-shirt. Unionized workplaces have something called just cause for discipline.
In other words,
so
it's an at-will state unless you have
a union contract or some implied or reasoned contract that gives you a certain number of years or months. That puts packing house workers and other employees in the state at quite a large risk. Unions to their benefit have just cause provisions in their contract. And they do away with that sort of arbitrary and capricious ability of an employer to get rid of an employee.
So it makes it difficult not only to ask for a raise, I mean, forget the money for a minute, it makes it difficult to complain about working conditions.
Well,
and just a number of things. Bathroom breaks. I mean, we laugh.
Well, the number of, there were 10 student interns in Nebraska for a month working with the United Food and Commercial Workers. They went to, I think, 10 meatpacking places in the metropolitan area and leafleted, telling people about the advantages of the union contract.
They were the interns for the union, nationally,
right.
yeah.
It's a union summer program, but that's
program.
that. And I visited with them and talked about their experiences to them, and they said there were a number of workplaces where employees, primarily Latino and Asian or Pacific Rim folks, would walk way around them and not want to be seen picking up a leaflet. There were others who did pick up leaflets, and the students asked what was going on, and the response was that we're so nervous about unionization in this workplace that a number of people don't want to be seen even taking a leaflet for fear of some sort of negative employment impact for just taking that. Now the Governor Johanns, to his benefit, has come out with I think 11-point
Meatpackers Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm. And one of those is the ability to organize a union without fear of repercussions. And I think that's a very courageous stand on his part. He, of course, understands that there is no real enforcement mechanism out there other than, of course, to organize a union. And I think the United Food and Commercial Workers in the state of Nebraska are committed to organizing a lot more of the workplaces. I think there are 100 workplaces in the state of Nebraska that employ meatpacker or meat processing folks.
But the unionization, new unionization in the state has not been extraordinarily successful.
No.
I think recently, and you could probably cite more examples, but the University of Nebraska Medical Center.
Right.
And that was a hard-fought kind of
very hard fought
battle, war, as most of them are in the large places.
Nationally, I think the number is 13.9% of the workforce belongs to unions. Public employees, whether that's state, county, municipal, federal government, 37% of the workforce belong to or are represented by unions. In the private for-profit sector, I think the number is about 9.4% of the workplace.
And that is increasing or decreasing? It decreased for
It has decreased
long time.
from a high point of about 35% of the population to 13.9. The last 2 years, it has held steady. Now, whether that is the beginning of a sea change or not, I have no clue. But it has held steady. The numbers have been dropping less and less year by year.
But they're still dropping.
Well, they held steady. And,
right, okay.
I mean, it
So
takes a
maybe that
long
means-
time to turn around an aircraft carrier.
Right, action and reaction and right, okay.
So there's, maybe this is the beginning of a change. But the laws that protect workers when they organize are not as strong as the laws that might protect workers' employment status because of their race or gender or nationality. If you are let go because of union organizing activity, and there was a presidential commission in the early 1990s that said approximately 10,000 people a year are illegally fired in union organizing drives. If you're let go and the employer is found responsible for having violated the law, the National Labor Relations Act, the employee is to be brought back to work. The employer is to put a notice on a bulletin board saying that they violated the act, and the employee is due all wages that they lost from the time they were fired until the time they were brought back to work, minus any earnings they might have made in the meantime at some other job trying to keep their head above water. Now, if I fire you because you're a woman and I'm found guilty, not only do I have to bring you back, not only do I have to give you back wages,
there can be
but there are punitive damages as well. There are no punitive damages under the National Labor Relations Act. So the incentive for staying within the law is not as great as if it would be for economic incentives.
Do you see, I think, when I look statewide, I think the groups that my heart goes out to the most are the farmers, for instance, and there'll never be a farmers union because farmers, bless their hearts, can't agree on anything, although there have been attempts
Actually,
to do
there
that.
is a national farm. There are a number of groups that represent agriculture in the state of Nebraska. One of them is called the Nebraska Farmers Union, headed by a fellow named John Hanson.
Right, but
That's family farm. That's the very
Yeah,
small family farm.
right.
That's not corporate.
and its impact on the greater corporate picture is not because it's a union, but because that's a whole other issue,
Right.
the farming impact of the individual farmer. But we have all kinds of wonderful people that are working wonderful jobs and good employers in this state that are making an attempt to, A, listen to their employees and pay them. But when you look at when I look at my portfolio, I say, you know, by golly, I want my 401k mutual funds to do well because maybe I'm not getting paid what I want right now, but you know, I've got that down the road. So I'm struggling now. You know, aren't there a lot of people in that boat like saying, okay, it's later or now, or I'll struggle now, or you know what I'm saying?
There are a number of ways to respond to that question. More and more people have direct or indirect ties to the stock market than ever before.
Right. In other words,
And
I'm
they
kind
want
of
to
a
see the stock
stockholder now.
market. Yeah, they want to see the stock market go up, and the stock market has been going up. Stock market's been going up. Unemployment is almost non-existent. Consumer confidence is up, but the wealth that has brought to us has not been brought even-handedly across the board. There's no equality there. Some people are doing significantly better thanks to our booming economy than others. This wasn't always the
CEOs
case.
would be among them, but and
The-
bless their hearts too.
Yes. The numbers for CEOs of major corporations are startling. In 1960, a CEO made approximately 12 times what the average hourly worker, non-supervisory worker, made in a factory.
1960.
1960. 1980, it went up to 40 to 1. In 1997, major corporations, it is now over 400 to 1. The ratio of the CEO compensation to what the average non-supervisory worker is making. There's a large inequity there. That wasn't always the case. If you take the period from the end of the war to the beginning of the 1970s, real wages for all segments of the economy doubled when adjusted for inflation. If you go from 1973 to 1997, 1998, you'll see that the richest 20%, the wealthiest, the best off 20% of U.S. families did the best. And the poorest 20 to 40% did remarkably poor. And it wasn't just people without college education. You brought up teachers earlier, and there's a study that's just out today that says that across the board, nationwide, that teachers' salaries, when adjusted for inflation, these are people with college degrees, are worse than they were in 1972. So,
But you know, I don't hear, and I'm surprised we don't have a revolution in some respects. In some respects. Because if these numbers that you, and I'm not questioning the
Right.
numbers per se, but if that were true, why aren't we hearing more? Now the teachers are getting vocal, we know that.
right.
But we're not hearing, you know, people outraged. We're not hearing a lot of that in the presidential election. We're hearing about Social Security, which is important to certainly baby boomers.
Right.
And we're hearing about, the cost of drugs for the elderly, and that's important too. But why, if there are such inequities or such shifts between the few making a lot more and the middle group making about the same or less, or maybe a little more depending on what occupation, I mean, why am I not hearing a hue and cry?
I don't think you're hearing it from either major political party, and it was interesting this year that the AFL-CIO Executive Board endorsed Al Gore, Vice President Gore, as the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, and they did it early rather than waiting for all the primaries to run their course. This is the first time since 1984, when they endorsed Walter Mondale, that this has happened. And it's particularly perplexing when you look at the difference between Vice President Gore and, say, candidate George W. Bush when it comes to NAFTA or the WTO. Both of them are very strong supporters of a global economy, and a global economy that is expanding the way that NAFTA and the WTO are expanding.
Well, even the labor unions.
They endorsed it. Now, there were two
Right.
unions that didn't. The United Auto Workers Union and the Teamsters Union did not go along with the endorsement of Vice President Gore. They have since held talks with, I know the Teamsters have since talked with George W. Bush and have had conversations with Green Party candidate Ralph Nader. And they are saying that we want, the Teamsters are saying, that there's to be presidential debates. They would want Buchanan and Nader in there as well so that other points of view could be heard. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't think it's either. And I don't think a
But it's interesting.
born again populist like Buchanan is. But the thing is, it seems like everything is done. I'm not trying to challenge you, but if there is not this hue and cry from everybody about
Pocketbook issues.
pocketbook issues,
Right.
other than, like I said, the cost of drugs and Social Security, then, you know, the American public is going to think, other than, you know, myself, maybe I'm just alone because I can't, you know, pay the bills.
Right, right. It's a problem. The voice for the average working person, there's no collective voice other than, I think, unions. Unions in 1996 and 1998 got very involved in political issues. And one of President Sweeney's initiatives was to spend a significant amount of money on educating the average member about pocketbook issues and how those relate to elected officials. And the 1996 and 1998 election cycles saw union members voting at a higher rate than ever before. And we saw some changes that brought unions and unions' ties to politics come under the microscope. In 1995, the AFL-CIO, its member unions, and their PACs, not the PACs at this point, the AFL-CIO and its member unions spent $35 million educating the average member about pocketbook issues that we were just talking about. In addition to that, in the 1998 cycle, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, unions, AFL-CIO, the National Education Association, all of them across the board, and their PACs spent $61 million aimed at political candidates and their parties. $61 million is a very large
Yeah, it's
number.
a big amount of money.
The same study by the Center for Responsive Politics said that businesses, business organizations, and their PACs spent $667 million aimed at candidates and their parties. So unions, big labor, the evil that is out there that is trying to influence politics, was outspent by business 11-1. And I don't hear much about that either. So
Well,
it's
campaign
interesting.
reforms sort of went down the tubes. It started out as an issue, period, on all sides. We have in Omaha the passage of the living wage ordinance, and
Right.
they've already made some changes to it,
They're fine-tuning it.
fine-tuning it. But there have been some criticism, lots of criticism about the living wage ordinance, saying that it is unfair, it's going to cost the taxpayers more money. There was criticism about how the Appleseed Foundation, what's the name of it?
I think it's the Appleseed Group. I don't know.
Milo
Out of-
Mumgard
right.
came in and, you know, sort of almost like a carpetbagger, came down from southeastern Nebraska and came up with these ideas and got the city council to buy into them, and it's just almost communist. I've heard people say it's just almost communist to do this.
These outside agitators, I'll tell you, Carol, they're dangerous.
And so we have a living wage ordinance in Omaha. I never really thought I'd see that happen. I don't know how much it's going to impact. It's
The target for the living wage ordinances across the United States, and as of January this year, there were 40 of them in cities and counties across the United
and the
States.
net effect of an ordinance like this, similar to this.
Right. They're
Is-
all of the. Well, they will affect those employers who contract with the city They will affect employers who are the beneficiaries of either tax abatement or tax cuts for training or other business subsidies at
Can
tax
that really
dollars
have an
expenses.
effect?
I think it does have an effect on those wage earners. The question, the larger question is, while it improves the wages being paid, will it hurt people wanting to contract with the city? Will it affect the city in terms of taxes going up?
Or even minority contracts,
Right.
small
Well,
businesses getting
right.
started.
Right. Will they be able to pay the minimum wage, the living wage that is now out there? The studies that have been done of the other cities and the other counties show that there's minimal effect on the impact of minorities to be able to get contracts or the amount of money it costs to administrate something as complex as this. But there are, to be honest, there are the cities that are led by Democrats say the cost is minimal. The cities that are led by Republicans saying, oh, this is quite a burden on us. We're having quite a problem with this. So it's hard to find anybody coming in from the outside to do a neutral study. You brought up Appleseed, and it's interesting that the numbers that they had looked at and brought up as being a minimum for a family to live on in the state of Nebraska were laughed at. They were ridiculously high.
However,
the University of Nebraska at Lincoln's Bureau of Business Research just published a study, I saw it in the World Herald on the 3rd of July, saying that in the 4 metropolitan counties in the state of Nebraska last year, there were a significant number of employers who were not paying enough money to employees for them to meet a minimum living standard. The numbers that the Bureau of Business Research came up with in these 4 counties was for a single person with no kids to be able to meet a minimum standard of living, they had to pay, I think it was $8.67 an hour, and 45% of the jobs in those 4 counties last year weren't paying that. For a family of 4 with 1 breadwinner, the wage was, I believe, $15.33 an hour. This is for a full-time worker.
well,
We're
running out of time here, but the bottom line is, this is going to be an issue. Are we going to hear more about it?
I think we're going to hear more about it at the county level, and there may be other cities like Lincoln that will be looking at it as well. It's an attempt to bring some sort of justice into a market economy that doesn't talk about justice. They talk about profits.
John Kretschmar, UNO Labor Institute. Call UNO if you'd like more information on the Labor Institute. And John's a nice guy to talk to. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Consider This.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates and First Data Resources.